Hey guys, so some new trauma updates. So we know that there's this fight, freeze, and now feign response. So it used to be that we talked about it as the fawn response, but it has been shown that fawning really implies this almost disempowering, gender biased, culturally insensitive term to what it actually takes to be in a situation in which you're using a survival strategy, right? So we know that when a person goes into a fight response, their sympathetic nervous system is activated. So this looks like the blood pulling from the large internal organs and going into the muscle group so the person can fight or flight. This response happens when an individual determines that they think they can take on their assailant, right? Or the person that is in that situation. They believe they have the strength to fight. The flight response happens in that same manner. They have now determined that the threat is not something that they can take on. Maybe they're smaller than the individual. Maybe they realize there's an area to escape to. So there's a certain level of assessment that their brain does immediately, right? So it says, I can take them, I can't take them. And based on that determination, there's an act chosen. They either fight or they flight. So when we're talking about this type of response, right, then we have the freeze response. So when we go into the freeze response, this happens likely because a person is in a situation that they recognize they can't actually get out of, right? So what that would look like, fight, flight, freeze. In the freeze part of that response, their sympathetic nervous system and their parasympathetic nervous system is activated. So fight, flight, the sympathetic nervous system is activated. The blood pulls, goes into the large muscle groups. The person has the ability to fight or flight. During the freeze response, when they don't know what to do in that situation, right? Perhaps it's a kid with a parent. Perhaps it's an individual who's about to be sexually assaulted by a person who's bigger than them. They've determined they can't fight, they can't flight. They're in a closed room, right? Or, we can give any number of situations, but the body activates both systems at the same time. The parasympathetic, which is the relaxation response, and the sympathetic, which is this fight, flight, freeze response. So when the two combine, the body freezes because it's in this relaxed state, but the mind is still there, right? So this state is often where the dissociative tendency breeds out of, because the person mindly does not want to be there, mentally just can't handle it, but their body is stuck there for whatever's happening with them. Now, when it comes to what was called the fawn response, again, because that's been so unempowering to individuals, and it doesn't actually reflect what happens, right? So when a person is fawning, right, it feels like they're just codependently doing what the other person wants in order to serve this person. It appears like there's no real strategy to it, right? So we want to be sensitive to trauma. And what it says, when a feign response, which is much more empowering, a person has a choice to get out of a traumatic situation, a stressor, so they develop this feign response. And in feigning, it allows the person to feel empowered in what they're doing, which is sometimes abiding by something, befriending someone, being compliant in a situation in order to not have themselves or another person harmed, right? And this is something we don't take into account when abuse is happening in a household, or when a person is living with a daily structured thing, or a person is kidnapped. They have to comply. They have to do this thing in order to survive, right? If you're a kid living in this situation and you know that every single night at 5 p.m. dad comes home and he gets blasted, or mom comes home and they get blasted, and at that time, if I don't do what they want to do, there's likely to be abuse, or they're going to blame me, or they're going to abuse my sibling. They're going to take it out on them. The kid in that situation is going to try to befriend or make this person feel better, and that takes strategy. So when their sympathetic nervous system activates and it doesn't shut down, right? So what ends up happening in normally the sympathetic nervous system, when it shuts down, it goes into that fight or flight mode, right? The only thing that's happening is the activation of this center called the amygdala, where that fight, flight, and freeze reflex is, which generally speaking will shut down communication with your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain, and your hippocampus, your memory center, so that memories can kind of become jaded. But what we see what happens with this response is it shows active communication with the prefrontal cortex, the ability to think through the stressor. What can I do in this situation? Which shows amazing fortitude, adaptation, and empowerment. That's an amazing coping skill that this individual developed in order to survive a very stressful lifestyle or situation. So what we want to do is we always want to work on empowering individuals who have been in high stress situations. So saying something like you're fawning, or that's the fawn response, it doesn't do justice to empowering the person. Also in psychology, we love to do this thing of matching things. So fight, flight, freeze, we wanted to find another F. So fawn comes to mind initially, and that's what happens. We don't think out the consequences of what that can cause societally. So now we have this whole generation of memes and stuff happening about people who fawn, which is disempowering trauma survivors, right? And so we want to really give them that power back. This is a feigning response. It is not disempowering. Your brain chose something in that situation that was very normal. It decided in that moment that the best thing to do was to survive. And really, that is all the brain is trying to do on a daily basis, survive the stressors of life and get you to that next day. Really? And then what happens with trauma when a person is out of the situation they need to survive? That instinct doesn't go away. That's where PTSD and complex PTSD is born, is this brain that has convinced itself it still needs to survive, even though it's no longer in that lifestyle anymore, right? So then a person is constant reacting out of this survival strategy. And I will say this, and I'm going to not curse, even though generally when I say this saying with patients, I do tend to curse, but your survival brain does not give a insert expletive word here about your mental health. But your survival brain does not give a about your mental health. It doesn't. It doesn't care about your mental well-being on a daily basis. It wants to survive. So it doesn't care if it's causing you anxiety. It doesn't care if it's causing stressful situations all around now that you're safe. It wants you to survive. So it's convincing you everything is still a threat. That partner, that family member, that loved one is still a threat, even though this is a new partner, this is a new family, that's a new sound. I'm not in the same environment. So we watch for these things, we have this awareness, and as we notice what things are causing, we adapt and we change. So I invite everyone to start adapting some new terminology that is trauma informed and that is empowering to individuals who are trauma warriors. And sometimes I think, yes, survivor is empowering, but I don't like that term. That's just a me thing. So I call all of my survivors warriors. They're warriors. They did battle. They still do battle every single day. And I think warrior can be very much so more empowering, because then a warrior can find their tribe and a warrior has their path. Survivor, it can be empowering. But for me, I like the term warrior. So that's why I adapt for my clients. And if they prefer survivor, I adapt back for them. But I invite you all to explore more empowering terminology for your clients. And if you are a survivor yourself, I encourage you to explore more empowering language for yourself. Adopting that, a feign response might have been what you did, and that is entirely okay. Whatever response you had, your brain was just looking out for you as best it could at that time. So you have a very strong brain. And you guys all have a really great day.